And good morning, everybody out there listening, and everyone here live at the Namaste Center on September 30th, the last day and the last Sunday of September in beautiful Hendersonville. And I'm just embracing and loving all this wonderful fall weather that's upon us. We took a great, Ellen and I took a trip to West Virginia this week to visit my parents. And driving, they call it the Country Music Highway, you drive from 26 heading west, and then 26 goes into 23, and 23 is the Country Music Highway, in case you didn't know. There's a country music museum about 100 miles up the road, and so if you're ever interested in a real treat, go do that. And never did it, but I imagine it's good. But if you like country music, that is. But we had a great trip, and you know, we were especially coming out of Carolina into Tennessee. It's so beautiful. And we saw so many of the leaves really starting to change. We noticed it here some, but when you get up into the higher altitudes, it's so beautiful. You're seeing the yellows and the deep reds, and it is absolutely the most beautiful time of year. And we're so blessed to be in probably one of the most beautiful places to experience the change of seasons anywhere you could ever imagine. So we had a great drive. We got to West Virginia a couple of weeks ago. My sister had called, and Suzanne, we call her Saint Suzanne, and because she is, I mean, she's Suzanne. If you're listening, see, I'm talking nice about you. And but she is she's the only one of my siblings that still lives in the hometown that I grew up in, Huntington, West Virginia, and she is. Really been so wonderful in taking care of my parents, just to the extent that it really does deserve a lot of appreciation, which we all do. And as a matter of fact, I was out walking the dogs while I was there, and the neighbor, my parents' neighbor, he came up and he said, "Boy, that sister of yours," he said, "I always tell my wife that your parents must have been awfully good to have someone take such good care of them as your sister does." And, you know, I am really grateful and blessed that they are getting such good care, not just from her, but from others as well. And so we get there, and it's Ellen finally decided she was going to join me. And, you know, she deserves a gold star, too, because first of all, my mother likes to smoke, and she doesn't really like to open the windows of the house. So when you walk in, it's pretty strong. And so you walk into the house, and Ellen knew that was coming. She didn't complain hardly at all. So that was an experience, and of course, you know, I find it so interesting because, you know, we are pretty holistically oriented, Ellen and I are, and most of us in here, although you hear me say often that, you know, I certainly appreciate science and I appreciate Western medicine and think it has a purpose and a function and to honor people in all their beliefs. Because although we may believe one way, doesn't necessarily mean that in West Virginia they do. As a matter of fact, my sister, Saint Suzanne, got shingles a couple of weeks ago, and it was so immediately she's like, "Oh, I was so lucky." And she said, "My next door neighbor's a dermatologist, and I went over there. She immediately got me on the medication, so I'm okay." And Lee, her husband, he went immediately for a shingles shot vaccine. So, you know, all is well, so don't worry about that, we're fine. And she goes, "You're got to get that shingles vaccine too, you don't want to get this." So I said, okay. I don't sit there and say, "What, are you crazy?" I just said, "Yeah, okay, I'll think about it." And of course, then the doctor came to the house to check in on my mom, and she goes, "I got your flu shots," and she's like, and I'm like, "Yay!" But anyway, but you know, it's real easy. I think I'm sort of going off course here, but I do want to express really how important it is, not only with maybe a medical belief, but also maybe our spiritual beliefs, that although something may work for us, it may not be exactly what someone else enjoys to study or participate in, or how they want to medicate themselves. And I want to look at this from A Course in Miracles perspective. And one quote from A Course in Miracles says, although a universal theology is impossible, a universal experience is not only possible but necessary. And what that's really expressing is it tells us that we're all seeking the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all want to be healthy. We all want to be prosperous. We all want the same thing, really, but it comes out in many different expressions. And so it really is about us individually taking self-responsibility for how we think and how we act. And the greatest, I think, change we can bring to the world, the greatest gift we can bring to the world is being an example of that change. Not sitting there and imposing our views about anything onto someone else, but just sharing our ideas, sharing our light. That's the greatest gift we can bring. And I say that because this past week, I had a interview on the internet radio show that I do on Thursday mornings. Another thing, my parents' computer is, it's used now basically by the grandchildren to play games on, so it's kind of like freezes up. And so I went in to do the radio show and I'm like, great, not working. But I got it to work somehow. It's got a mind of its own. It works when it feels like it, but about 3 minutes before the show, it's like, yeah, I'll work for you. So I was like, whew. But anyway, the gal who was on the show, her name is Robin Rose. And she's the founder. I've known Robin now for almost 20 years. And Robin is the founder of what was originally called the Universal Lightworkers Conference. Has anyone participated in that? It's really, as they say, the best conference in the world. And in many respects it is. It's, you know, they started back in Palm Beach Gardens. I was at their first one. And Greg Braden, Jimmy Twyman, they had a lot of Dan Millman, Don Miguel Ruiz, all of these really great people before they were ever names. And so she's really done such a great job in presenting all these wonderful teachers and giving them that step up and to help them, you know, get their names out there. And Robin always saw herself sort of at the back end. She was the creator, she was the administrator, she was the one, you know, running around making sure everything was all fluffed up and perfect, and really did a darn good job at it. Does a really good job at it. She not did. And anyway, what happened to her a couple of years ago, she told, and I didn't realize this because I only thought that this happened a couple of years ago, but she wrote a book and she's been channeling Mother Mary. And I thought, well, wow, that's so cool. And we were talking about it just this past couple of days. And I said, so when did this start happening? And, you know, you wrote your book a couple of years ago. What happened? She goes, well, actually, this has been happening since she was 5 years old. And Mother Mary talks to her all the time. And she decided now, people are saying, you know, Robin, it's time you start to share this message. It's time. This is the time of spiritual awakening, time that people really need to hear this message. And of course, you know, Robin takes great pride in the fact that here she's had and introduced all these wonderful teachers and speakers throughout the years. And now people have encouraged her to actually step up, share her message, and what's Mother Mary have to say. And most of the people who have presented there, they would be what you would call cutting edge or leading edge teachers, speakers. Theo, Sheila Gillette, who channels Theo, which is actually a consortium of angels who inspired Abraham, Esther Hicks, to channel Abraham. And so she's had some pretty esoteric presenters over the years. So I said, well, what's Mother Mary want you to talk about at the next conference? And she said, you know what, Charlotte? She said, actually, at first I was like, you know, I was talking to Mother, and she said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And she's like, that? And she was like, she was waiting for some, like, you know, the skies to open and something really exciting to come through, and some great profound message for the times. Yet Mother Mary just came back very simply. and continued to tell her, this is a message that has not yet been learned, and so it's time to go back to the foundation. You know, we all want to jump out there, the next latest and greatest thing, let's check this out, check that out, but it's pretty simple. And the message is that to really know who we are, and that was where I was headed in my meditation, is that we are created in perfect light and love. We were created by a creator who loves us so much, yet we've somehow forgotten, and we've forgotten how loved we are and how loving we are. And if we would just focus on that connection with Spirit, then everything else would come from that place. There's nothing out here. You know, that's really what the Course in Miracles and other teachings and even science is reinforcing to us right now, is this being the illusion. And all this world is a projection of my thoughts about it. So if you want to check in and know where you are in consciousness, just basically look at your world. And so it's all about going inside, tapping into that Spirit of God within you, that Spirit of love. And when we do that, then the whole picture, the whole vision of the world changes just by that. Because if we're not coming from knowing who we are, if we're coming from fear, from judgment, from lack, whatever, the world is just going to reflect that back to us. But if we come from love, then everything in our life would be better. So it goes back to that idea of building our house on, not on sand, but on rock, a solid foundation. And so often we want to jump around to the next best thing. And it's certainly helpful and useful that we can use all these things as a means of awakening. But if we haven't gotten the first piece of the puzzle done really on solid footing, we're not going to be able to really gain what we need to from everything else. So she said that message is very simple from Mother Mary. You know, just learn to love yourself. A Course in Miracles, which incidentally, this, I don't know how many books, Course in Miracles books. And if you notice, this is a different one. This one's published by the Course in Miracles Society. And it is a little different. So it's the only one I had at home, and I was fumbling through it. The rest of them are all here. And I was fumbling through it, like, where can I find what I'm looking for here? Because I wanted to, it is a little bit of a different layout. So I'm so used to knowing exactly where everything was in my book, and this one sort of made me do a little work, sort of. But what happened, which was so cool, I said, Ellen, you won't believe this. Now, I have never used this book. Honestly, I've never used it. And I found it in the closet, and a friend of mine gave it to me years ago. And I was like, responsibility for sight, and I'm looking through, I can't find it. I open it up, literally, and there is this, Ellen, of all things, Ellen's card, with the dachshund on it, and guess where it is? Responsibility for sight.
Wow.
Now that's weird. Ellen, have you ever used this book? Have you been reading this book in the secret? I don't know. So I thought, well, that was pretty cool. And then as I went in, I said, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about illusion versus reality. And I'll be darned, one thing I do like about this book, it's got a glossary in it, built in, so I didn't have to go dig up my glossary or look online. It was right here. So anyway, I wanted to talk really about the Course in Miracles thoughts about, or teachings about illusion versus reality. And the definition here of illusion is something that seems real, but it's not. A belief about or perception of reality that is false. The Course expands this common definition to include anything outside of heaven, anything that is separate, imperfect, finite, or painful. So it just goes on to reinforce that it says something that seems real, but it's not. And how often we look for our sustenance and value out here. I was just listening on the way in. It's perfect timing, 9:30 to 10 on WHKP, the Christian Science. They have a radio show. And it just goes right back to that again. They were talking today about sickness. And that sickness is illusion. And there is no sickness in God. So if we go back to the teachings of Mother Mary, if we go back to the teachings of A Course in Miracles, Christian Science, if we go to the mind, capital, all capitals here, the mind of God, there is no sickness there. And that's where we need to live more, because there again, this illusion is constantly engaging us in suffering and pain and drama and whatever. And you got to look at it as, I know that it's very simple. There's no suffering in spirit, and there's a lot of pain in the illusion. So if you're not at peace, choose again. That's really the basis of A Course in Miracles. And it talks, so I mentioned a little bit there about illusion, but reality, what is reality according to the Course? And that it says, what truly and permanently exists independent of deception, illusion, and subjective opinion. The Course claims that the only true reality is a transcendental realm known as heaven or eternity, a realm of pure, unbounded, changeless spirit. And so that's not of this world. Changeless, as I mentioned in the meditation, changeless, formless, and eternal is spirit. Form is constantly changing. And we sit here and we're wasting so much energy and using all of this as a distraction from really living in that state of peace and eternity right here and now. And I also, this is when we surrender. I'm always talking about surrender. A month ago, I was feeling pretty beat up, just like, okay, enough already. And I finally just said, okay, God, I really surrender, you know, and things changed. Well, no, things didn't change, actually, but I changed. And some things did change, but it wasn't that I didn't have to be upset by those things anymore. I just deal with things differently because I've decided that I'm going into these things with a different mindset. I'm not going to choose to allow those things to upset me. And if I do, I recognize I'm in my ego, I'm in the illusion, and I make another choice for peace. Well, we also are constantly looking out here thinking, well, I know what my best interest is, and I know what yours is, and we're always trying to, you know, move around. I think I mentioned this last week, but it's such a great quote from Marianne Williamson. It's like when the, you know, all this chaos is going on outside of ourselves, trying to fix it is like trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. And I think, you know, as it's sinking, and it's just not going to happen, you know, so we have to really go into that space of trust and knowing that I don't know what my best interests are. Lesson 24 in A Course in Miracles says, I do not perceive my own best interest. And it says right here, in no situation which arises do you realize the outcome that would make you happy. Therefore, you have no guide to appropriate action and no way of judging the results. What you do is determined by your perception of the situation, and that perception is wrong. And it goes on to say that if you realize that you don't perceive your own best interest, you could be taught what they are. But in the presence of your conviction that you do know that what they are, you cannot learn. The idea for today is a step towards opening your mind so that learning can begin. And that is there again, just that letting go and let God. Saying, okay, I really don't know what my best interests are, but I'm open to be shown. Show me a better way to do this because my way is not working anymore. I've really come to the knowing that as spiritual beings, as children of God, that we have a power and a presence that so far exceeds anything that this world has to offer. Yet we continually, you know, seek but don't find, as A Course in Miracles says. But it does take practice. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of willingness, responsibility for sight, as that section talks about. And it says right here, very opening sentence to the responsibility for sight. We have repeated how little is asked of you to learn this course. It is the same small willingness you need to have your whole relationship transformed to joy, the little gift you offer to the Holy Spirit for which he gives you everything, the very little on which salvation rests, the tiny change of mind by which the crucifixion is changed to resurrection. And being true, it is so simple that it can't fail to be completely understood. Rejected, yes, but not ambiguous. If you choose against it now, it will not be because it's obscure, but rather this little cost seemed in your judgment is too much to pay for peace. And it goes on to say, what are you holding on to? The Course really does, even though there's a lot of pages here and a lot of words, it's a very redundant, repetitive message. And it's about us saying that I'm willing to place my mind in the hands of God. I'm willing to surrender what I think is right. I'm willing to let go of my need, as A Course in Miracles says, do you prefer to be right or happy? And this little mantra here says, say only this, but mean it. You gotta mean it, don't just say it. Mean it, with no reservations, because here is where the power of salvation lies. So this is a really powerful statement here. And it starts with, I am. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide on the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and have received as I have asked. It says right there, deceive yourself no more, that you are helpless in the faces of what is done to you. Acknowledge, but that you have been mistaken, and all of the effects of your mistakes will disappear. Now, how's that feel? Pretty good? But we have to be willing to let go. I am responsible for what I see. Well, you like it? Does it feel good? If not, choose again. It's that simple. And this is this little statement about the ego. And the ego, great acronym for the ego, edging God out. And I know that, I'll repeat this again because it was so funny when Oprah had someone on her show and they said, oh yeah, all the ego, the acronym for ego is edging God out. And she goes, whoa, wait a minute, say that again. And I just, oh my God, that is so powerful, edging God out. So I was like, okay, Oprah, good. So I'm glad you like that one. And but all the ego is the idea that it is possible that things should happen to the Son of God without his will, and thus without the will of his Creator, whose will cannot be separate from his own. And what that really is reminding us is that our will and God's will are one in truth. The ego is really an illusion. The ego doesn't even exist in reality, but it's very real to us here because we've programmed it so deeply into our being. But if we just be willing to say, okay, I choose to allow the Holy Spirit to be my guide rather than the ego, then we can, live that message from Mother Mary, from the Course of Miracles, from all the other teachings. It's up to us, though, to be willing to step aside, though. Now, I did want to, just in yesterday on the way back in the car, we were listening to Ramtha, Jay-Z Knight, and, she's cool, she's amazing. And if you've never, Ellen used to teach a great group in Florida, and seriously, you won't believe this. There was a group, and the ceremonies that Ramtha does, you smoke a pipe, because then you have to smoke it a certain way, and it's not marijuana, it's just pipe, and then you drink wine, and you do these toasts, and they come to the center, everyone come with their bottle of wine and their pipe, so they said they were doing spiritual studies, I guess, but what happened was that Ramtha, Jay-Z has a ranch out in Yelm, Washington, at the base of Mount Rainier. And every one of Ellen's students went out there to live. They all live there now. And so they're still out there after, what, 10 years? It's amazing. And but Rantha's a very powerful teacher. Jay-Z's a powerful teacher. I've heard both. I've heard Jay-Z teach and Rantha, and they're both wonderful. But the same thing as Jay-Z was reinforcing, no, it was Rantha, I believe. Rantha is the voice that comes through her. A whole other story there, but we'll just say Rantha for now. I won't give you a history of how Rantha came to be. But anyway, Rantha, same thing. The message was, about creating our day, creating our life. We have to take responsibility. We have to be vigilant. She was expressing in this, or he was expressing in this CD about this exercise. People go out there and it's pretty strict discipline. It wouldn't work for me at all. I mean, I'm not going to live in a tent with a mask on for a week and be in a bucket. Some people get it, and it works for some people. And but that's not really what I choose to do. And but anyway, she's
too much to imagine.
That's right, exactly. But for some people, it really works. And but anyway, the point that she was making was about this exercise they were doing, and they do it in the middle of the night. And they have to go out with these masks on, and they go, it's a whole other, but anyways, she was expressing about the vigilance and how, these people say they want, she goes, you say you want this, you say you want peace, you want to be the master of your life, you want to live with God, you want to walk with God, but really you don't, because you're so easily distracted. And it's like, you could have put your full energy and intention on this exercise, but yet you chose to complain when you got up in the morning and say, oh, I want to sleep, I don't want to get up and do this again. And, that's a severe example, but the point that was being made, I feel, was that we do tend not to be as serious, as committed to our spiritual path as maybe we could be. And if we're still finding things to complain about, that tape that's playing over and over and over in our minds is just going to continue to pull that back into our experience. So we have to just sit back and say, okay, where could I have done a little better? Where did I let things slip today? Where am I still not willing to forgive? Rantha went on to say you want the kingdom of heaven, you ain't going to get there when you're holding grievances and judgments towards another. You forget about it. So forget about it. But it's really up to us and to pay attention. And that's what the course is all about, is a course in mind training. Pay attention to every thought. Guard our thoughts. Pay attention. Choose to recognize when I'm in fear, when I'm in judgment, in pain, that I can make another choice for peace. And the more we do that, we build up that mental musculature, which enables us to not be in this world, but not of it, and not be affected by what seems to be happening. And we like to tell our stories. We like to say that I'm a victim of circumstances and conditions in our lives, and that's fine if you choose to do that, but there's not much heaven in that decision or that choice. So back to, just as we close here, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had the real pleasure of Dale Allen Hoffman, who came in and gave his perspective on the teachings of Christ through Christ's language, the Aramaic language, which was really the language that Jesus spoke in and taught from. And yet, 2,000 years later, Jesus has come to us, say in the Course in Miracles, and expressed in a language that he intended to meet us with, that we would understand where maybe we missed the mark, okay? But the Aramaic, one thing, how have we, even remembered all the, you don't see it so much anymore, but the sporting events, someone would be hold up a sign, John 3:16. Everywhere you went, they wear funky hats, and they'd be like, behind or whatever. Well, we go to the King James Version. He had actually given this out to us, Dale did, a couple of weeks ago. And it's based on the Aramaic translation of John 3:16, King James Version. We've all heard this because we live in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish but have everlasting or eternal life. And the program, the teaching is that only begotten Son is Jesus. Okay, yeah. So the course says Jesus is one of many who has attained that knowing, that self-realization. That's potential in all of us. There have been those, Jesus, Buddha, and others who have mastered that. But if you go to the Aramaic translation, I like this much better, and it is much more related to what the Course in Miracles says. And it says, so the absolute only being awakened love within creation, as to bring forth a Son who is absolutely single and limitless in being, so that all who live from the rooted center of being will not remain unconscious, but shall realize eternal life. So it says, all who live, being so, all who live from the rooted center of being will not remain unconscious, but shall realize eternal life. So we're all, that gift is here for all of us, but we have to be the one to choose it. The Aramaic, the message of Jesus was not, I am the only chosen Son. All are chosen, few choose to listen, is the message of A Course in Miracles. We all have that power, but we have to choose to remain in that sacred centered space and recognize that when we're off center, just to pull ourselves back in. We're at a time now, Mother Mary, all these other wonderful enlightened beings are coming here to teach us not necessarily anything new and profound, but really, number one, maybe get the translation right, and number two, start to live it. Don't just talk about it, start to live it. And I really, for my own self, I'm getting it more and more every day. I'm recognizing when my little ego wants to go over here, and I really don't choose to live there anymore. I don't want to be there. I don't want to live from there. I want to live in the kingdom of heaven. And it's, as A Course in Miracles says, the kingdom of heaven is here now. There's no place to go. There's nothing to do but just to recognize it and live from it. So let's all transcend our minds together, live from that kingdom of heaven, and experience the gifts that we're meant to experience here and now. And so it is. Namaste.
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 Namaste.